think it's time for all of us to sit down, and we will call the meeting to order. First thing is to note the fire exits. There's not a lot of us here tonight, so it'll be fairly quick to get out. Just the main doors would be enough, but always remember there's a quick exit out the side doors on stage right, and another exit way in the back. The other thing, I'm not sure we have to worry much about cell phones tonight either. There aren't a lot of us. And there's no real program. Tonight's program has been amended because Annie and the Hedonists could not make it down the thruway, and so their presence was canceled. So we tried to think of some other things that we'll do to, in lieu of a program, and we have some ideas for that. We can discuss that at the end of our business meeting. But first we'll do the business meeting. I'm not sure if we do we have any strangers here? Anybody who's never been to an ADK meeting before? Oh, well good, welcome.
Did you come just for Annie and the Hedonists? No, we came because of our friends. Oh,
Well, great. Thanks. We're glad everybody's here. Those of us who could make it tonight. The first order of business is the elections of officers and directors, as single director. The nominations have been open for a good 8 weeks or more, and we had the nominating committee nominate these 5 people for the various positions. For chair, Nancy Donnie, who's vice chair this year. For vice chair next year, Annie Fulgarty. There's Annie, one of the few people who likes to sit up in the upper section. Secretary, Grace Fuller, will continue in that role. For treasurer, we have Peter College. Is Peter here tonight? No, I didn't see Peter. And director, Shirley Thomas, and unfortunately, Shirley is currently still in the hospital. She had an emergency appendectomy Friday, I believe, and she's still been in the hospital, but she's due to come home soon. And that's why Jackson Thomas is not here tonight either. He's spending a lot of time with Shirley. So there's no bookstore sales tonight either.
maybe that's the real reason our
That may be, because Jackson is not here. And we have no raffle tonight. Okay, so first order of business is the election of the officers. And according to the bylaws, since there's only one person nominated for each one of these positions, I can nominate the secretary to cast one ballot for each of these people for their election to their position. Grace, would you do that? No, that's okay. You can just announce it there. You can use that.
really loud.
Yeah, you can use that.
Do I really need it?
Yes.
I can be really loud without it. I cast the vote for Chair Nancy Donnie, Vice Chair Annie Fogarty, Secretary, that just doesn't seem right, Treasurer Peter Collins, and Director Shirley Thomas, who hopefully will be home soon and feeling well enough to do this.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
Okay, on to the next order of business. Where are we going to eat?
No. The next order of business is there's still some conservation items to bring to your attention. The first thing is that the New York State draft open space plan is still open for comments. Region 8, the Western Finger Lakes, has some priority items that for which they'd like to use funding. This is a state program where the state has funds to purchase open space that's held in private hands and turn it into state property. If that open space has some characteristics that the state finds desirable from an environmental point of view. And these are some suggestions for some of the items that we have thought are useful candidates for open space funding. Some of the big ones, some of the ones you may be familiar with are the Seneca Army Depot, where the white deer are. Genesee River Corridor, in the sense that if we maintain more public access to the river, we find the river seems to be kept in better shape. It doesn't mean one has to buy land along east and west side of the river for miles on end, but simply some access points for kayakers and boats and other items. Then there's also another slide that lists some other items. You may have some other open areas that you know of. One thing that was mentioned tonight, there's the old quarry in Penfield down at the what is it, just at the head of Arundecoy Bay, that's looked at being developed by the town of Penfield, and that could be a candidate also for open space. If you have some comments are open until December 14th. Send them to the address listed, or you can go to the DEC webpage, and just under a search page, you can type open space, and then it'll take you to the various areas where if you want to comment. You can also look on our website, and on the conservation page, we will list those same links. Next item is Shay, the lodge trip. Oh, okay. Why don't you come on up? Use that way.
Here's something that may be of interest. I don't know how many of you have heard of the legal doctrine of park alienation. It's been very important locally. It's a doctrine it's a common law, legal doctrine, came over from England prior to the United States becoming a country, under which a dedicated park cannot be sold or used for anything other than park purposes without the consent of the state legislature. It's been a long-standing doctrine, been very important in Monroe County over the years. There is a lawsuit going on elsewhere in the state dealing with Niagara Falls. It's a private lawsuit. It doesn't involve ADK, but it involves the right of the company that runs the Maid of the Mist boats to take some space in Niagara Falls State Park to use to build like a depot for its boats, I guess for storage. And some private party is fighting this. And one of the arguments they raised was that to allow a private developer to basically be given a portion of a state park violates the park alienation doctrine because the New York State Legislature has not approved that. Well, this has gone through the Supreme Court, which is the lower court in New York State. Then it went to the Supreme Court Appellate Division, and at both stages, the courts denied the applicability of that argument. Actually, when it reached the appellate level, the language of the court was that no one has brought before this court any case law to support the concept that the park alienation doctrine applies to states. No one argues that it applies to counties and municipalities. But this court was saying nobody's brought any case law before us supporting the idea that the state is bound by this as well. Well, this came to the attention of the executive director of ADK, Neil Woodworth. In the course of doing some research on another matter, he came across this case, and of course he saw red when he saw this, because this would have huge implications for New York State if we reach a point where some developer is able to say, well, I want to build a shopping center in the middle of such and such a state park. I wouldn't need the approval of the state legislature. So our executive director, who's also our legal counsel, contacted the attorney involved in the case and said, well, you know, I have some case law here that I would like to supply to help you out, because Neil did fair amount of research in this. And of course, the help of ADK has been most welcome. So we're getting involved in that litigation, either indirectly by supplying some legal authority to the attorney, or directly by filing an affidavit. We're not becoming a party to the lawsuit. It's not a lawsuit that involves ADK at all, but I just thought you'd be interested in that because this case is going up to the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York State. And so it's very important that we get a definitive ruling that this doctrine applies to state parks. That's about it, thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Shane?
Just a short announcement on the lodge trip. It's the weekend of February 19th to the 22nd, so that's Thursday through Sunday. We do still have some beds in the family bunk rooms, and that's all that is left. But in fact, I just got a check for one of those beds just a few minutes ago. But I do have a few more, and then we've got wait lists for the private rooms and the loft. And the snow is there, and the snow is here, as we know from missing Annie and the Hedonists tonight, but you get another chance at the lodge on the lodge trip. They will be playing for the group the Saturday night and staying at the lodge Saturday night. So you'll have all of Annie, well, be Annie and Johnny Rosen, not the other two. If you're interested, you can give me a call. And the information details are in this month's, Genessean, and you need to register on our website, on the page. You just go to our homepage, chapter's homepage, under outings and events. I think it's on there as winter lodge trip, and then send in the deposit. I'm just about to send in the deposits to the lodge for our beds. Thank you.
Okay, Marty? Trails?
Oh, I was just looking at that to see what Nancy wanted me to say, because I didn't put it on the, I sent her an email telling what I wanted to say, so. The first thing is that there's a trip, it's in January for its Catskill Winter High Peaks. We're going to do 3 high peaks. It's from January 16th to 19th. There are 4 openings left, and he needs to close it out because he needs to have the motels by that time. There are Saturday and Sunday hikes. The only thing I say is there's a lot of snow out there, and it's probably going to melt and probably going to be a little slippery. So I mentioned gaiters, or culas, or microspikes, or react tracks. The Saturday hike is at Allison Park. It's about 4.6 miles long. It's got 3 steep hills, and it starts at 10 o'clock. The details are on the ADK website if you want to go, or if you want to. If you don't have access, you can talk to me after the meeting. The Sunday hike is the Crystal Hills, and it's out of town. It's 10 miles and 1,200 feet of climbing. We do this once a month for a more challenging hike. You need to qualify with a hike leader to at least do one Sunday hike, and you can contact him. His email is again on the ADK website, and he'll see if you qualify for hiking, as far as what you did on the Sunday hikes and that. That's about all I have to say. I don't know who follows me. They told me, Dave, okay, from Younger Numbers.
Now you can hear my voice. So I'm excited that our Younger Members Lodge trip is coming up, the winter weekend, and this is the 5th year that we've done it. Woohoo! So, it's, as you can see there, it's February 13th through the 16th, and The date is somewhat confusing because most people actually do work on Friday, and then like they might leave early or they might work a full day and head up to the high peaks afterwards. So if you can't get the day off of work on Friday, it's not a big deal. Most people do take off Monday if they don't have it off, because some people have that day off for a holiday. But for anyone who's interested in going, and there's not too many people here, but I'm being recorded, so hey, you out there in Cyberland, the registration and a whole lot of details about the trip are online. Just visit the website. There's, if you just go to the ADK website on the sidebar, you'll see the winter weekend trip right down there on the sidebar under younger members. And that will bring you to the page that has all of the details as well as a link to the registration form. And anybody who wants to come, I just ask that you fill out the registration form and send in the deposit, which is due upon registration. And that's about it. Charlie?
Next, Charlie.
Which hat am I wearing? Oh, Expos first? So, our Expo's coming up in June again. Probably everybody 98% of the people here have been to Expo at least once. We have our planning meetings next Tuesday night at Tom and Donna's house. We are always looking for people to help us come up with new ideas and join us on our committee. So if you're interested, please come join us.
What is the date?
I don't know. What's the date? It's June 13th, I think it is.
Saturday.
Second Saturday in June, which I think is the 13th. And we got it's Richard's job to order up nice weather. So then my next hat is Waterways. We have our holiday party on January 10th. It's going to be at Peg Warwick's house. And should be fun. I don't see too many Waterways people here, but there are a few. Wait a minute. I said there's a few. And it's a bring a plate to pass, and we're asking that you contact either Peg or myself ahead of time so we have an idea of what people are bringing. Other than that, that's it. Next. What's next? Nancy?
Yeah.
Bookstore, Jackson.
Jackson's not here.
Wait a minute. Where is it?
Jackson asked me to wear his hat tonight, so there's no raffle, so sorry. And Jack did a good job of informing you that Shirley's in the hospital, so first time in like 20 years Jackson isn't here, so I guess we'll give him a break. You know, it is kind of his wife and stuff. So, but he did want me to give you the message that if you wanted holiday calendars or gifts from the bookstore in time for Christmas or holidays, please contact him and he'll make arrangements and make sure that you get them. Okay? And then we were going to have CDs from the band, but they called around 3 o'clock, so I didn't have time to change the slide. Sorry.
Okay. So what's next? What's our suggestions in lieu of a program?
I think everybody wants to go to a restaurant.
We thought if people have individual stories to tell, typically outdoor stories, especially maybe stories that involve another member.
Especially if they're not here to defend themselves.
Are there any other?
I've got one little tiny story.
Sure.
Gretchen was going to come and tell us about the worst canoe trip she ever had. She started telling me stuff, and then she called and said she couldn't get in the car and get on the road. So, darn. I tell half the story, but it'll be good. Before I went with ADK, I paddled my own solo canoe on Canada Ice Lake. It's really called Nancy's Lake, but I let people call it, Canada Ice. So I went out there by myself a lot, but I also like to watch the stars besides being on the water, so I watch what's going on in the sky. So Venus was going to transverse the sun, go across the sun, and you have to get a good view of it. So I lived like down in a hollow in the trees in Springwater, so I got in my canoe and I paddled out to the middle of the lake where I could get a good view of the sun. And I put my husband's welder's mask on, and I sat there in the middle of the lake watching Venus go across the sun. It was fun. And I looked like a goofball, but I don't care. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Any other volunteers? Stories? Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
I got plenty of stories. But here's one short story, as short as I go at least. So this summer, actually it was fall. It was a beautiful, gorgeous fall weekend. So I had to get up to the high peaks. None of my friends were free, so I went solo. And there I am, I decide to climb Iroquois, Algonquin, and Wright via Avalanche Pass. And as I'm on top of Iroquois, off, like just sort of in the distance, I see this guy with something hanging out of the sides of his pack. Not quite sure what it is, looks like a sign of some sort. So, I kind of scratched my head a little. It's like, that sucks to have to carry whatever he's carrying it, but must be a good reason. So, I go down to the Cal, and I'm heading up to Wright, and I'm hanging up on Wright for a while. And just gorgeous day, the foliage was perfect, you could see forever. I'm just starting down the mountain, and I see this guy again. And I get a little bit closer look, and there he is, and there's a big board hanging between his back and his backpack. So, I'm not always the one to go up to somebody and just, hey, what's going on? What's that? But I was just too curious. So I asked him, because I don't see any writings. It doesn't look like a sign. So I say, hey, what's that board? Is it a sign or something? What's that for? So he pulls out this little, about 2.5, 3 foot long ironing board. A homemade ironing board. Then he takes off his pack, opens it up, and pulls out an iron and says, hey, would you mind taking my photo? I'm doing extreme ironing. So I guess there's this thing out there. So I get to talking to him and says, I was working on a bucket list, and he's about my age, maybe give him a few more years, but not an old guy, but he's working on his bucket list, and he was trying to think of a few things that were a little out of the ordinary, but not too difficult, although I wouldn't carry an iron up a mountain, and that's, I don't bring my camera because it's too heavy. So, he says, there's this thing, people, they scuba dive and iron, they climb mountains and iron, I wouldn't be surprised if, one of these SpaceX guys goes up into space and goes to the moon with an iron, but, but my big question really wasn't so much about carrying the iron, I just wouldn't want to be the sap carrying the extension cord. That's my story.
Any other volunteers for story?
Click one more slide that goes to Happy Holiday.
Back here?
No, forward. There you go.
There.
That's a beautiful sign.
It is. Any other volunteers for a story? A tale to tell? Yes.
So, tell some numbers My husband and I went kayaking a number of years ago in the fjords in Patagonia, Chile. And one experience that we had that I don't think I'll ever forget was there were 3 dolphins who swam right beside our kayak, and they amused themselves by breaching and going over the bow and then under the kayak and around and about, and they kept that up for about 15 minutes. And I thought that was one of the most beautiful experiences I had ever had outdoors. It was just phenomenal, and I'll never forget it. Now, if you're talking about embarrassing experiences, well, I can tell you that many years ago when I was a student in Ottawa, I don't know how the hell we managed to do this, but we dumped our canoe in the Rideau Canal right in front of the Arts Center. And, you know, you can't have flatter water than that, but I don't know what happened. We dumped it. And it happened to be a very chilly day, and 2 of the 3 of us had to paddle back because we had to take the rental canoes back for a few hours, soaking wet and in a cold wind, and we were quite miserable. But the look on the people's faces, because there are all kinds of people having, you know, eating at the restaurant in the Arts Center, and the look on their faces when we dumped the canoe was quite amusing for them.
Come on, Jack. Hold the story.
Well, I don't have necessarily a specific story, but I thought about a theme, and this is something maybe I'd like each of you to think about, and that is, what is the worst night that you spent outside? Either trying to sleep or staying up all awake, maybe something even from your college days, or later days, adventures in the Adirondacks or any other place. I remember one of the worst nights I had happened far, far away from here. It was in the South Pacific. It's a climate much different than Rochester. In fact, the climate so warm that by the time I came back to Rochester, it took me 2 years to get used to the winter. Simply a temperature of 60 degrees was cold enough for me to put a couple sweaters on and have to wear a heavy coat outside. But anyway, I was teaching overseas for a couple of years, and one of the things we would do on weekends is we would travel around the islands. And we would go maybe, 4 to 6 hours by a little local bus, crowded in. We would grab our snorkeling gear and skin diving gear, and just take a little briefcase with a towel and a change of clothes, and maybe they'd go at $50 for the weekend, and then go up and find a little place to stay. This time, we hired a canoe to take us out to a national park. And the national park was a set of coral islands, small coral islands, maybe typically just 1 to 2 acres and smaller. Some were only as big as a table. It was a national park because they wanted to protect these coral areas. The coral areas were very rich in tropical fish. And prior to making this a national park, they had a lot of local fishermen using primitive methods to harvest the fish. And the most primitive method was to use dynamite, and something which would destroy the coral, besides destroying a lot of fish, which the people would not eat anyway. Well, anyway, so we traveled out to these islands, made an arrangement to be picked up the next day, about 3 in the afternoon, and we went out midday. We spent the afternoon diving and swimming around the area without any canoe or water transportation. We were limited to how many little islands we could go to. But then we came back and had a small fire, go to our dinner at night, and then found we didn't have tents, we didn't have sleeping bags. Each of us had brought a blanket or 2. And so what we did in the Coral Islands, the high water mark, where the high tide would wash away parts of the old coral, you'd have a lip much like having an overhang of sandstone. And so we crawled into into this overhang, and naturally, since it's made out of coral, it tends to be sharp. There are a lot of other shells and other things sticking down, and then got settled in for the night. And one of the things about the tropics is not only is it warm, mosquitoes. And when you have these old coral islands, there's all kinds of pockets of where the fresh rainwater can settle. And so naturally, there's all kinds of places where the mosquitoes can live and breed. And so that was the first thing we had to fight off. And naturally, we didn't bring any mosquito repellent with us. And then as the night got on, we were tired enough and had enough whiskey that we could fall asleep. But then, lo and behold, about 2 in the morning, I hear this noise, this slow creeping, cracking noise, like something moving across the coral or moving across the shells. And it's not just a single individual, but it's a lot. It's a concatenate. It's almost like somebody's taking a bag of shells and shaking them. And you wonder what that is, but you're tired if you don't really care. Wow. Then a little while later, I feel movement on my legs and on my arms. And so I turn the flashlight on, and what it is hundreds of hermit crabs, tiny hermit crabs, coming up the shell beach, underneath the overhang, and crawling over us, and just making our night miserable. So I couldn't sleep after that, so I had to sit up and wait for the sun to come up and the hermit crabs to go away before I could get some rest in the sun. That was one night, one of the worst nights I've had. How about you? Have you? Anybody else have a story to tell about one of the worst nights you've had outside?
Quite as exciting as some of the others, but it was my first experience in getting caught outside. A number of years ago, I was backpacking with a friend of mine who was trying to get his, I don't know how many hills or peaks we were going to get that weekend, but we somehow got a late start going up. And we got about up to the top of one of the mountains. It got dark, and it started raining. And of course, we didn't have rain, anything for the rain except a tarp. And so we found this little dry spot, about so big, where you could sit down and perch yourself. Everything else was just flooded, and it just flooded all over. So we put the tarp over us, and that's when I found out I was claustrophobic. So trying to stay dry on this very small little piece of things, and trying not to pull it off and scream at the top of my lungs was a more exciting thing. In the morning, we got up and we started going down the stream, and of course I fell in the water. Don't take me on a camping trip, you can tell from that. So I fell in the water, and we made it back down all right, but then I had to get my clothes all off, so I didn't do it. But I'll never forget that night with trying to find, all of a sudden realizing that I could not keep my head under that tarp because I just would wake up screaming. So anyway, that's my note.
Anyone else?
I shouldn't talk again, but if you want to hear about terrible nights, okay.
Well, you told us about your most pleasant experience outdoors. So.
The Quetico Park. And this was when I was living in Toronto, and some friends and my boyfriend and two friends, we took off in their Cortina, a little tiny car that they had back in those days, and we drove and we drove and we drove 1,000 miles around Lake Superior to get to Quetico Park. But we never saw Lake Superior because it was raining so damn hard all the time. So we get to the park, And finally, the sun comes out. We're much encouraged, so we go and rent our canoe, and we paddle off to this very nice little place, this island, and we pitch our tent. And of course, in the middle of the night, you know, as these things happen when I don't really want them to happen, but I have to get up to pee. And of course, there are bear tracks all around, so I was quite, I was very speedy that evening. But then it started to rain again, so we paddled, we brought the canoes back, and we decided this is it. You know, we've had 6 days solid rain, this is a terrible thing, so we'll go home. So we're on our way home, it's a Sunday, and we didn't realize how few and far between open gas stations were. So we managed to run out of gas. We pulled off the road, luckily, and we were near a train track. Not on the train track, equally luckily, but we were. So the four of us are trying to sleep in this damn cortina. And then about maybe 5 in the morning, when people had managed to doze off, there comes the train, woo, woo, about 2 feet away from us. And we just about jumped out of our skin. So that was a really terrible night.
Anyone else?
Well, it's not really a story, but if I speak this loudly, can I avoid the microphone? No. No. My husband and I spent our first and our last overnight at the lodge, and we treated ourselves to a private room. I think it was our anniversary in October, and we just thought this was perfecto. This was the Ritz, and had a wonderful dinner, got into bed early, and about 1 o'clock in the morning I could hear gnawing, and I mean loud gnawing, and I grabbed I keep my headlamp right by the bed, because if I wake up I can read and don't wake Paul up. So I quickly put on my headlamp and looked around, and there they were, in our bag of trail mix, you know, just a whole family of mice. And I thought, cotton picking little buggers. Oh my God, they didn't tell us they had mice. Of course, if I had thought about it, look where they are, you know. So I got up, and they hadn't gotten through the bag yet, but, or whatever it was in, box, I don't know. And I zipped it inside our suitcase, got back in bed, and 5 minutes later, I hear gnawing. And you know what that sound is like, especially if you're on alert. And they were eating through the suitcase, the canvas suitcase. So I got up and I put it in the dresser, and I still had to learn. Get back in bed, next thing I know, they're gnawing the dresser. So, and Paul says, let him have it. You know, like, you want it in the morning, just leave it alone, go back to sleep. Well, I couldn't sleep. I said, I'm taking it out to the car. So I put on my hiking boots and my nightgown and my headlamp. I would hate to have run into anybody, and I go all the way out to the parking lot, put it in the car, lock it in, come back in, and as I head through the lobby of the lodge, if you know what it looks like, there is a poster this big that said, beware, do not travel around the property at night alone. There are active bears. Or bears active at night on the property. And I'm thinking, oh my God. You know, I could have, you know, just to get rid of my trail mix and make it safe, I could have been eaten by a bear, I thought. And the next morning when I asked whoever was manning the desk there, why on earth would you not have a sign right at the check-in that says, do not bring food into your room, because of course we have mice, you know, and he just sort of played dumb and said, oh, you had a problem, you had some visitors? And I said, yeah, and I could have had my head taken off by a bear while I'm trying to rescue my trail mix. And that's, I don't know if anyone else has had that experience, but We haven't been back to the lodge, unfortunately.
Thanks. Great. Anyone else? Volunteer story? Nancy?
Presentation here about my trip to St. Regis. It was my first, basic 101 canoe camping that Gary DeWitt taught us, and I forgot about this last part. So we were packing up to leave, and I was very independent. I did the whole program on how independent I was, and my tent was way far away from everybody else's tent. So I was, being all experienced and everything and packing up my tent, and I had everything in the canoe, and I started to get in the canoe, but I didn't have it tethered to the land, so I had one foot in the canoe, and it kept going and going and going. And that was all there was to it. There it was in the water. And all my stuff was safe because I made sure the canoe didn't dump, but I took a dive. So I got out, and I guess they maybe heard the splashing or something. They said, "You need help?" And I said, "No, I fell in, I gotta change," like this. "You want me to bring my camera?" "No, don't bring your camera." So it was cold, it was September or something, so I had to take everything off, and of course everything was packed, so I got out, what was handy, and I got it ready, and there was trees around, but still. So I'm right on the shore, and I take everything off, and just as I'm naked and reaching for my clothes, going in front of me in the canoe was the most gorgeous young man I've ever seen in my life. And I don't know if he had seen me, but he was making sure he was looking straight ahead. So then I put my clothes on, and I made it into my canoe all safe and sound, and I was still cold, so I paddled to the first portage on the way back, and there he was, backpacking, big and strapping, and picking up his canoe, and again, he was kind of like, okay, That's it.
Anyone else? If not, I think we should bring this meeting to a close. We have another option. We could show a movie. Nancy, what's the name of the movie?
I Am the Adirondack.
I Am the Adirondacks. That was the one that we showed a year or so ago here. Is there any interest in seeing that movie? Okay. Well, why we take a moment, those of us who would like to leave or have other things, worried about traffic, go ahead and go, and the rest of us will stay and watch the movie. What do we need to do to start the movie? Do I need to shut the slideshow down?
Ben has it, right? Ben? Ask Ben to put it in. I think he's got it up there.
Okay. Ben, could you start the movie and the music, please?